Haja, you let us know when we can begin. Um, I can
Yeah.
see that there's still a lot more people joining.
Okay, we are hearing you. Yes.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, everyone online. Give us 1 minute to admit everyone in and to start. And our apologies for the 4 minutes, 3 minutes delay. Heja, let us know if everyone is connected now.
Yes, Nama, we can start. Yes, everyone is connected.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is our pleasure to welcome you to this session of the Information and Library Series. As always, this aims to foster meaningful discussions and provide us with valuable insights to support our work at the bank. And today we have an exciting line of program focusing on two pivotal themes that are shaping the trajectory of Africa's development, which is the ECG country analysis and then the infrastructure investment outlook. And these topics are not only timely, but also highly relevant to the challenges and opportunities that we face in the bank's mission, basically to drive sustainable and inclusive growth across the continent. So the environmental and social and governance considerations have become central to decision-making processes across the world and their implications for us within the Africa region. And at the same time, infrastructure remains a cornerstone of development, offering us vast potential to unlock the economic growth and improve our lives, basically the lives of Africans, when investments are planned and executed effectively. So to guide us through these topics, we are privileged to have two or more experts from the Business Monitor International to join us. It is renowned for delivering cutting-edge analysis and data-driven insights. And today's session promises to be no exception. Whether you're you're involved in supporting RMCs on policy making or project development or research, there's something always that will be here for you to benefit from. But before we go into the exciting presentations, I would like to call on the director of the African Development Institute to give his opening remarks. So over to you, Dr. Eric Ogunleye, Director of African Development Institute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Namawu, and good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So good afternoon once again, everyone. Hope we had a good lunch. Okay, so it is indeed my pleasure to welcome all of us to the first session of our Information and Library Learning Series in 2025. I'm sure all of us will enjoy the different perspectives and the different focus that we had in 2024. You can rest assured that the 2025 series will be equally highly educating and also very beneficial for all of us. As some of us might know, this initiative has become an important platform for knowledge exchange and capacity development within the bank. And I'm thrilled to see the enthusiasm and encouragement as well as engagement that we're seeing among colleagues and among others who join us in these sessions. So today's session is particularly exciting as we dive into two critical themes that are shaping Africa's development trajectory. The first one is the ESG country analysis, and the second one is the infrastructure investment outlook. So we are indeed honored to have Business Monitor International, BMI, which is a leading authority in economic and investment insights, joining us to provide exclusive data and perspectives on these two important issues. So as we all know, Africa's development challenges are deeply interconnected with global trends, including climate change, infrastructure development, and as we know, environmental issues, social issues, and governance, as well as infrastructure investment are key levers for building a sustainable and resilient future for our continent. The ESG analysis will provide us with a nuanced understanding of how climate change impacts Africa, shedding light on resilience strategies and economic outlooks that are essential for the work we do in the bank in supporting the regional member countries. Meanwhile, the infrastructure investment outlook will also give us a forward-looking perspective and opportunities and projections that can inform our strategies for fostering sustainable growth and development on the continent. So today's session is designed to be practical and insightful, equipping us with the data and tools that we need to make informed decisions in our different roles in the bank. It will also reflect our commitment as a bank to empower staff with cutting-edge information that aligns with our vision to drive Africa's transformation. So I encourage all of us to engage very actively during this session. I also want us to use the opportunity we have during this seminar, not just to learn, but to also exchange ideas that can enrich our collective understanding and influence the work we do. So I want to thank all of us once again for being here. And I indeed look forward to a very fruitful session. So let us now welcome our esteemed speakers from BMI to lead us through these very fascinating and interesting topics. Thank you once again.
Thank you
You.
so much, Eric, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for the warm welcome as well. It is quite a pleasure for us to be here and present these insights and outlooks to you guys. Good day, everyone. My name is Nzwaki Moja, and I am an account manager at Fitch Solutions. I predominantly manage the relationship that we have enjoyed over the years with the AFDB and other development finance institutions, central banks, and the likes. With me, I have my esteemed colleagues. I'll first introduce your dedicated customer success manager, myself, and Joe are dedicated to supporting the AFDB, all of you as you are users of the BMI platform and you have access to essentially all the information that we're going to share and more with you today. So I'd like to introduce Jo Coker, and she is our customer success manager, looking after yourselves. Like I said, we are here to support you. So we will leave our details so that you can contact us should you need any assistance. But to get to the uh, presenters of today's um, presentation, I'd like to introduce to you Adinda Bearings, who is an infrastructure analyst at BMI. She's based in South Africa. She covers infrastructure development, key construction activities across various African markets, with a particular emphasis on sub-Saharan Africa. And prior to occupying a role within the BMI as an infrastructure research analyst, she joined Fitch as a data analyst as well, leveraging her analytical skills in providing data insights to infrastructure, power, renewables, oil and gas, operational risk, as well as ESG services. And I'd also like to introduce to you our head of infrastructure research at BMI, Matteo Adonizio. He leads analysis of the infrastructure and construction industries globally. He joined BMI in 2017 as an infrastructure analyst himself, focusing primarily on a primary focus on markets in Americas. Matteo has expanded his role and leads the team for the infrastructure service here at BMI. And lastly, we have our head of ESG country research, Matt Satovsky. Matt is, like I said, our head of ESG country research based in London and has previously worked within the BMI's political risk team and as well as a background in business consulting with a focus on strategic risk and due diligence in EMEA, international development consulting, and also holds a degree in economics, conflict, and development as well. So I'd like to give you guys an opportunity, and you can go ahead and begin your presentations. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, Moja. Thank you for those elaborate introductions. Before we have Matteo and Matt come in, we would like to take a family photo. So if all participants could put up their camera, the cameras are open for all participants to put up so that we can take a family photo in just 1 minute. Colleagues, please put on your camera. Tanya, let us know when you are ready for the photo. Tanya, let us know when you're ready for the photo.
Yeah, should we start smiling now?
She will alert us in a minute.
Okay.
Tanya? Heja? Just one moment.
Watara, please, are you ready to take photo?
Hello? Have you taken the photos, please?
No.
I haven't started smiling. I'm
Hello,
still
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
No, yes, I can hear you.
So have you taken the post photos or should we start
Please.
smiling now?
No, there's
Yes.
an issue with the video.
Yes,
Okay.
There's an issue with the
let me take a
videos.
photo now.
Okay. Everyone smile. Are you done?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's done.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. You can put up your videos if you like, or we can continue to see your beautiful faces. Matteo, Matt, please proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the kind introductions, and I'll do my best to deliver on your high expectations with the presentation. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Please let me know if not.
Yes.
Yes,
Excellent. Thank you. So in my presentation, I will talk about our outlook for climate change adaptation and vulnerability in sub-Saharan Africa. I will use data from our new ESG country service, which we launched last year, which you can see a general introductory slide here. I won't go into too much detail about exactly what the service does, but in a nutshell, it tracks the implications of environmental, social, and governance issues on economic growth and industries on a country level. I will use the data that underpins the service to deliver my presentation. So I need to explain a little bit about our metrics for climate risk, specifically natural disaster risk, which you can see in the second row in this table here. So we construct our natural disaster risk index with two key components. One we call exposure and one we call resilience. Exposure is a metric that tracks the frequency and intensity of disasters. It looks at both chronic and acute disasters. So it looks at both the actual climate data, and it also uses a high frequency tracker of disasters and how intense they are, what kind of destruction they cause, and how countries are recovering from those disasters. And we then look at, for the second component, which we call resilience, we then look at how countries are able to withstand, how resilient they are to disasters, and also how they are able to recover. So this is an indicator that includes data about infrastructure, data about state capacity, about the government's ability to administer aid and development assistance, the government's relationships with key international partners, and also its macroeconomic fundamentals in terms of being able to finance recovery from disasters. So that's just in a nutshell, just to, because I will be using this data, so it's, I think, important to explain what goes into it. To dive straight into the presentation, Here is our outlook for climate risk in sub-Saharan Africa. On the chart on the left, you see it on a short-term, you see the short-term outlook. And in the map on the right, you see the long-term outlook. In our system, higher numbers mean high risk. So the fact that the number is falling in a few countries, or quite a few countries actually, that means the risk is falling. So the outlook is positive. I will start with the chart on the left. So what this shows is on the horizontal axis, so going from left to right, this shows the overall absolute number, absolute level of disaster risk across 25 selected countries. I selected them by their total size of commitments by the AFDB, just to keep it relevant for this audience. And what you can see is it's quite a mixed picture. You can see lots of countries improving, but lots of countries also getting worse when it comes to disaster risk. Now, why is that? Well, most of the negative changes, most of the increases in the risk, you can see happening in West Africa and in East Africa. You can see countries, you can see large economies there, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and also a few smaller markets. And a lot of this is driven by changes in exposure. So it's driven by the legacy of droughts from last year, which now to some extent seem to be likely to be exacerbated by more frequent rainfall in this year, because we are in the La Nina phase, which tends to imply higher flood risk, greater rainfall, greater concentration of rainfall, and because we have had that more dry weather than usual in the past few months in many countries, that means the soil is more conducive to actually to increase runoff, which tends to again be leading to higher flood risk. So that's something that's being captured by the model. On the positive side, we also see lots of economies advancing in their economic development, recovering from economic crises from last year. We see infrastructure investment increasing. We see a bit of movement towards greater urban planning reforms, for example, and climate risk frameworks being developed and implemented, especially in several countries in East Africa. Tanzania and Kenya come to mind here. Financing is very interesting, and here where we, as a sort of input into our model, and when we look at the COP29 conference, which has just concluded, we actually, obviously, we have had that increase in financing targets, which of course, I suppose it's better to have an increase than nothing, but of course it fell short of many people's expectations. The increase in climate finance actually seems like it will happen regardless of the announcements made at COP29, and it seems to be more driven by changes to lending by multilateral development banks, which have been in part driven by the G20. I will talk about this in a bit more detail just in a minute. But in general, this kind of positive story with economic development, infrastructure investment, urban planning reforms, that's something we expect to continue in the long term, and that's why in the map on the right you see lots of countries, especially in southern parts of the continent, being colored in green, because that's what's driving that improvement in the score. Of course, these dynamics will play out differently in different markets. So I thought I would pick on three of the larger countries where AFDB is heavily involved, namely Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And just so you can see how these three markets perform here, actually was quite an interesting study, because if you look at Nigeria, the risk in Nigeria is increasing both in the short term and in the long term. In Ethiopia, it's only increasing in the short term, and it's actually falling in the long term. And in Kenya, it's improving both in the short term and in the long term. So it's quite an interesting sort of set of three a smaller subset of three countries to consider what are the implications, what are the drivers, and what are the implications of climate change and climate change resilience in these markets. So what is driving climate risk in these three markets? And that's what you can see in the chart on the left here, which breaks down the natural disaster risk component into the components that I spoke about to exposure, resilience, and some of the even more granular indicators when it comes to resilience. So starting with exposure, you can see that all three markets have actually a lower exposure risk compared to the global average, right? So if you sum up if you take the average across the entire world and you compare how countries are exposed to disasters, how frequent and intense disasters are, these three countries are actually slightly better compared to the global average. But if you look at the resilience indicator, they are much, much worse, especially Nigeria and Ethiopia, but even Kenya. And so that is a key sort of point of weakness and key point of weakness now, and a key sort of source of opportunity in the future, because in some ways building roads is easier to fix than sucking carbon emissions from the atmosphere. And so what exactly is behind this resilience score? Well, if we break it down, you will see that logistics and transport infrastructure are actually a key source of strength in Kenya, for example. I'm referring to this middle column called transport quality here. But it's a key area that needs improving in Nigeria and Ethiopia, and especially in the rural areas. And relative to the global average, the second last column here actually is quite interesting as well. This looks at the quality of housing, and you can see that all three markets sort of significantly underperform when it comes to the quality of housing. So that's sort of the situation right now, and the key question then is what will actually happen in the future? Do we expect these issues to become better? Do we expect these potential opportunities for improvements to actually materialize? And the right-hand chart here helps us answer that. So this shows the overall change in the components that I have shown on the left. In some of them, there are a few more in that chart, just to give you a more comprehensive picture. And again, negative number here means that the risk is actually falling. So negative means good in this chart. And if you look at sort of just which countries are seeing the greatest change, you see a major decrease in what we call debt service index for Nigeria. And that just means debt servicing costs will between now and 2035. So this looks at the change over the next 10 years. So it's quite a long-term outlook. So Nigeria's debt servicing should improve. That's based on our forecast and on our macroeconomic by my macroeconomist teams. But that's pretty much the only sort of major change with Nigeria. And what that suggests is that there is a lot more to be done other than sort of this long-term macroeconomic reform. There's more. There are other reforms that need to be implemented. There is additional investment that needs to flow in order for Nigeria to actually meaningfully improve. One of these potential reforms is the urban planning reform that the city of Lagos has proposed for this year with their stronger housing code. Whether they are able to implement that remains highly uncertain. But just to give you an idea, some academic studies suggest that around 60% of all settlements in the metropolis are in high-risk flood areas. So that's definitely a key source of risk when it comes to climate change. So this change is a bit of a contrast to the other two markets, a bit of a contrast to Ethiopia, for example, where we expect climate adaptation to improve. One key factor behind that view is the IMF deal reached in July last year, which will provide substantial support to investment into several different areas of the economy, including agriculture and infrastructure. So there are clearly opportunities ahead in these markets. I mean, reforms in public sector lending together can help attract private finance, but it's a long road ahead with lots of risks ahead. Right, in both Nigeria and Kenya, we have seen reforms to raise revenue delayed for various reasons. That's something to reduce the space for investment, and the economic and social problems that have actually led to those delays are unlikely to be resolved for some time. So that's something that needs to be accounted for. As a result, we see the gap for private sector finance being quite large, especially when it comes to climate adaptation, which is a key sort of problem for the continent, because as you can see from the chart on the left here, This breaks down adaptation finance by source, by whether it's public or private. And you can see the private finance being quite lacking in sub-Saharan Africa there. Whereas in other regions, such as Asia and in developed markets in North America and Western Europe, it's actually the dominant source of adaptation finance. Now, many of the reasons behind this situation, such as corruption, conflicts, lack of public services, frequent power cuts, human rights problems, and just the general state of physical and digital infrastructure. These problems are captured by the overall ESG index that you can see in the charts in the middle and on the right. The chart in the middle shows you just how these countries that I've selected compared to the global and to the sub-Saharan Africa average. And in the chart on the right, the time series for this index is rebased to January 2023. So it shows the change since 2023 in percentage terms. And you can see actually Kenya being quite a positive story, followed by a few of the other markets, including Nigeria and Ethiopia. But it's quite a gradual improvement. Only over the next few years do we see a meaningful improvement in some of the other markets. And that, again, points to the fact that some of these challenges are deeply interconnected and just require a very significant and comprehensive effort to be addressed. And that's why we only see a gradual improvement in climate risk ahead. And that, of course, translates to...
If you could wrap up.
Yes, I will do.
Okay, thank you.
I will end on a more positive note because, as I mentioned, there are many opportunities ahead. One notable source of these opportunities is the G20 initiative to reform lending by MDBs, which will see MDBs take on more risk and leverage their funding a bit more. One of the key funding facilities here, and that's what these two charts shows, is the lending increase to markets in Africa as a result of funding being available to the International Development Association, which is part of the World Bank. And what this shows is quite a few large markets in sub-Saharan Africa benefiting. And crucially, but if you look at the chart on the right, it shows that, again, areas such as infrastructure, social services, public administration, those areas that are most important to address for both attracting private investment and resilient growth should attract a bit more finance. I will end on that more positive note and hand over to Matteo to walk you through the infrastructure section.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, everyone. So I'll just share my slide deck. It should be right here. See if this works, and then I'll start the slideshow. Hold on, okay. And give me 1 second. Hold on, let me move this down a bit, get it right. Slideshow, and from the beginning, let's see. Okay. All right. Does everybody see this all right? Is that coming through clearly?
Yes, yes,
yep.
yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. So Africa's infrastructure sector has a fairly strong outlook, which I'm going to go into now, and Adinda will also join me a little bit later to look at some of the key trends around that. To kick off, so one of the key indicators that we at Fitch Solutions and BMI use to look at the construction industry and the infrastructure sector is gross value added of the construction industry, similar to a GDP by industry figure, right? Looking at the construction sector. What we've got here on the slide is real growth. So taking inflation out, what is the real growth of the construction industry for Africa over the coming decade? We do a 10-year forecast period, so that's what you see here on the slide. And as I said, we have a fairly strong outlook for Africa's construction industry over the coming decade. Looking at the short term, we forecast growth of 4.7% year on year in 2025 and 5% in 2026. That comes after growth of estimated growth of about 3.9% in 2023 and of 4.2% in 2024. So we actually are currently anticipating an acceleration of growth in the region. This will be underpinned by a number of factors, among them easing monetary policy in key markets, robust investment in infrastructure development, ongoing rapid urbanization as well being a supporting factor. And I think it also links with what Matt was discussing around multilateral lending, and that being, of course, a key driving force as well. Over the next decade, so looking at the long term, we forecast growth of 4.7% on average year on year over the next decade, which is slightly up from average growth of about 4.5% over the previous decade. As you can see, effectively 2020 weighed down the average, right, as you would expect with the pandemic, but still a fairly strong outlook. To put it in context, we can see where that sits within the global picture. So this is across all different regions globally. These are our expectations for construction growth, both in 2025, 2026, that's the red column, and then 2027 through to 2034, that's the blue, in the chart here on the left. And as you can see, there's a very robust outlook for Africa with average growth, as you can see, far above in both 2025, 2026, as well as over the longer term, ahead of all other regions globally. Notably, Asia Pacific is the second quickest in terms of growth expectations. Growth of a little over 4% over the near term, and then closer to 3.5% over the long term, followed by the Middle East, as you can see there. One caveat, though, it's important to note that while Africa will outperform in terms of growth, the relatively small size of Africa's construction industry in US dollar terms means that opportunities will still be more limited compared to, for example, Asia Pacific, which accounts for over 40% of the global construction industry. So just to put some perspective there, but nonetheless, a very significant growth outlook, for the region that really stands to drive new opportunities. Looking at what it means on a country-specific level, as you can see here, we see a pretty significant diversity in growth outlooks across markets in the region, ranging from very robust expectations for growth in Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda, Mozambique, Ethiopia, to very weak outlooks, for example, for South Africa, and to a lesser extent, Zimbabwe, Angola, Algeria. What's underpinning some of these key driving factors? For Cote d'Ivoire, for example, which we anticipate to be the growth outperformer in the region over the coming decade. We expect growth to be supported by a strong economic growth in the market, supportive macroeconomic factors, as well as substantial capital investment across different infrastructure segments, including in transport development there, with some pretty significant investments underway in the transport segment. Other markets, Rwanda, infrastructure investment there, for example, in the development of a major airport and road building programs are helping to support the relatively strong outlook we have there. Whereas in Mozambique, we highlight a very robust outlook, in particular for both the energy sector, with significant investments coming in LNG plants, as well as some relatively robust investments underway in logistics infrastructure there. Rounding out that top four, I highlight also Ethiopia, which we anticipate to see very strong growth, supported in part by reconstruction efforts in the market and a stabilization broadly of the macroeconomic and political landscapes there. Egypt, while a little bit smaller, given its size, while relatively short, more limited growth, I mean to say, given the market size, it will also be a key driver of investment in Africa, in construction overall, and also in infrastructure in particular. That's driven by robust investments underway in the transport segment, for example, the high-speed rail developments there, as well as very large non-residential building investments, for example, tied to the new capital project that's the new administrative capital project there that's underway. In terms of the markets that are seeing more weakness, South Africa stands out. Oh, I jumped a slide. Let me go back. South Africa stands out there, really is the weakest growth outlook. It's driven by a number of different factors that underpin our outlook for the market. In particular, relatively challenging environment for infrastructure development there, which is weighing down on investment, both in the residential, non-residential building segment, as well as in the infrastructure segment. And the utilization of funds also stands as an issue there. That's limiting the actual capital investment on the ground that can support that market. I'd also mention Algeria, given its large size as a construction industry, one that we expect to relatively underperform as well, though there are significant investments underway. And the construction industry there is fairly large as a percentage of GDP. So while the growth outlook won't be strong, investment is in fact significant there. Given the time, I won't go into all those different outlooks, but there's some of the key ones that we're looking at and that we're thinking about there. So there's a few key trends that we want to highlight within this outlook for infrastructure and construction. First, I'm going to go through here and talk about both our outlook for public and private investment. And then Adinda will wrap up with looking at the development of strategic logistics corridors, which we also see as a very significant trend within the infrastructure sector in Africa over the coming years. So looking at this slide in particular, so we anticipate, and this is a key theme that we're watching globally this year. We expect that the public investment will be fairly weak in many emerging markets in infrastructure and in construction more broadly over the near term, given limited capacity on the part of governments to advance capital spending. This is the case. This is significantly the case in Africa in particular, where a number of markets are facing limited fiscal space, with debt burdens consuming substantial government revenues. And in these markets, for example, Nigeria is one example, prioritizing interest payments over potential capital investments. As you can see here in the chart on the left, this is our expectations for capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP, and you can see Africa-wide, which is the gray dotted line up at the top, significant weakening expected between what we've seen in 22, 23, 24, and then what we anticipate in 2025, 26, 27, and 28. And you can see certain markets where that weakness is certainly evident. We have Egypt, where we've seen a substantial reduction already in 2022 through to 2024, which we anticipate to sort of level off, but also continue over the coming years. Nigeria, we anticipate it to weaken somewhat in 2025, though the anticipation is that it will bounce back after. Ghana, also anticipation for it to decline, and Kenya also seeing a drop in 2025, though the expectation is for a recovery somewhat thereafter. So this will put stress on infrastructure development because it will limit the ability of governments to advance new projects and launch new projects, and will hold growth in infrastructure development and construction overall under its potential in much of the region, over the coming years. That said, it will do two other things. One, it will make multilateral lending particularly important, right? Because of the ability of multilateral lenders to come in and augment the ability of governments in the region to advance more projects and support them with technical capacity and so on. It will also, in our opinion, create significant incentive for governments in the region to advance private investments and look for ways to boost private investment in infrastructure, including through the use of public-private partnerships. As you can see here in the chart on the right, Africa actually stands out among regions globally in terms of the percentage of large-scale infrastructure and construction projects that are PPPs. In particular, if we look at the value of projects, it is by far the highest of any region globally. So it's a very significant project pipeline. Just as a note, this data comes from our BMI infrastructure key projects data. So this is data that we have on infrastructure projects around the world. Generally, we include projects over $50 million in value. So that's why I say large scale. But we can see a very strong outperformance there of Africa within the PPP project pipeline globally. Many of those projects, a high percentage of those projects, are still at the
Matteo, if you could
pre-construction.
wrap up in
Yeah,
1 minute,
yeah,
and then
sure.
maybe, yes, okay, thank you.
Yeah, most of those projects are still at the pre-construction stages, so it does highlight challenges in infrastructure development in the region, but also opportunities if governments can succeed in getting those projects moved forward. Just pass it to Dinda real quick, just to go maybe slightly over a minute, if we can steal a little time from the Q&A, just to go through the right here, the regional strategic corridors. I think it's an important point, so pass it to Dinda real quickly there.
Matteo, if you don't mind, we'll just do would wrap unless she's going to come in within a minute to summarize. But what we would want you to do is to give us a demonstration of how bank staff can access this data and utilize the data basically to generate these kinds of analysis.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can just summarize the quick points here.
Okay,
Then,
thank you.
if we only have a minute. In terms of the demo, we'll get to that in a sec. So just the main points here, we anticipate SSA to see very robust focus on these logistics corridors as governments look to enhance regional trade networks, and also as both within the region and internationally, there's a focus on accessing critical minerals and other potential exports. Limited fiscal space will limit public investment, so will force private investment to be involved in this, and will really incentivize governments to look to boost private investment in these areas. We expect the coastal markets to see the most investment, given the fact that they're key to allowing that export of the critical minerals and other exportable goods. That will be the focus of this. But also, we do see potential investment for the hinterland markets, to some delay, but particularly areas where we see critical mineral demand. An example being the Lobito corridor and the potential investments there in Zambia in particular to access critical minerals there. Yeah, I'll stop there. In terms of the demo.
Matt, you muted yourself.
You are on mute, Matt.
Apologies. Let me
Matteo,
unshare then.
yes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what do you want to see? You want us to give you a walk through the platform? I mean,
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot to look at. So I don't know if Matt and I are best to do this, or maybe if we have someone else on the line from the BMI side who may be more used to doing the demos.
Okay, so what we can do is while you're figuring out who would do the demo, we can open it up for Q&A, and then in about 5 to 7 minutes, when your focal person is ready to give us the demo, we could take the demo, maybe a 3-minute demo on how to use that subscription that we have with BMI to be able to generate relevant analysis for the African Development Bank, for our reports and our documents. Thank you. So let me call on to the colleagues. Let me first of all begin to thank you very much for the insightful presentations across board, and call on to my colleagues to see who has questions and comments to basically, or feedback essentially to provide. Thank you. Colleagues, the floor is open. I see a hand, but I don't see the name. Okay, Daniel, please proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Namal. I'll first start with the first presentation. So in the first presentation, what I realized was that the forecast shows that debt service index is expected to improve in the long run, which was demonstrated, especially for the countries involved in that one. But what I want to find out from is what actually went into the estimation of the debt service index relating to climate finance, because I want to find out whether these were related to financing that came from, let's say, climate financing angle, not all the various type of financing that the countries actually normally tap into. So that is the first one. I also want to find out whether the improvement is also hinged on the fact that long-term performance in domestic revenue is expected to also boost that particular component to bring that up. Then we also realized that the 300 billion pledged by the advanced economies at the recent COP29 for climate finance, we saw a number of developing economies that were complaining that it was inadequate. And it's actually true, because if you look at the needs of developing, it's more than, and this is the target in 2035. So I wanted to know, judging from this, would this continue to make the DSI improve in the long run, knowing that the countries are already complaining that even what is promised by the advanced economies are not adequate? And then the last one, this one is on Matthew's presentation. You made a point which was cogent, because normally multilateral funding or concession funding is squeezing on the market. We are not getting enough for African countries. So private sector financing has been the key area. But then the challenge that comes with that is also the debt service issues that I'm still on, because once concessional financing is squeezed on the market, they will be resorting to commercial financing. And this, we know the effects of the interest rates. Even now that we are seeing that monetary policy is easing in advanced economies, we can still see the interest rates in advanced economies are still up there. They're up there. So that's one I want to also, and would that also go to compound the issues that these developing economies of West Southern Africa goes through? Thank you so much but I enjoyed the presentation, the way the site for.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Maybe we could take one or two more questions before you come in, or you'd want to answer these.
I don't mind, up to you, but I'm happy to take those. We had four already from Daniel, so I feel like.
Okay. Colleagues, are there any more questions? Okay, I don't see any hand, so please proceed, Matteo and Matt.
Matt, I can take the last question first. So it's a great point in terms of the financing challenge and the interest rate aspect of it. And certainly, I think it's important to, even in our view of more opportunities for private investment in the region, I think the caveat there, which probably I should highlight more so, I should have mentioned more so, but certainly is that it's still limited compared to, for example, what we see in other regions, right? And I think that's accounted for by the fact that most of the PPPs in Africa that we include in our database haven't reached construction yet. They're still at planning stages and initial stages, and financing being a very key challenge there in order to move those into realization. So certainly it's a good point, and I think it's important to note, and I think I'll reiterate, while we do have positive view that the limited public sector capacity should create some more incentives for governments to look to bring in private investment, there will be significant challenges to that. And I think that's a very important one that you highlighted. So I'll pass it to Matt for any additional, if he wants to comment on the first point there.
Yeah, I can take those questions in turn. So first of all, with the debt service index, that's simply that's what you get when we take the way it's calculated is by making an index from 0 to 100 out of how much governments spend on actually paying interest. So those are interest payments taken as a share of government revenue. And what that gives you an idea of is how much space there is for governments to spend their money elsewhere. So it's a very simple index. It doesn't include climate finance. The way climate finance comes into our index is it feeds through to other other analyst forecasts and through our high frequency data feed from a company called GeoQuant, which it takes too long to explain exactly how that methodology works, but it involves analysts using a AI generated, AI curated feed of sources. That feed is selected for sort of truthfulness. It's selected, it's pre-selected by analysts, and it is then analysts then score the news stories that come from that feed, and based on a summary of these stories that also relates to climate finance, they then assign a score to the government's environment policy and how much finance there is coming through to those markets. So that's how that would filter into our index. And insofar as so that's the debt index. The other question was sort of related to that, which was will revenue whether there is a potential increase for government revenue, and how that feeds through to greater climate change resilience, and the answer is yes. So that's one of the ways that countries are able to invest into issues such as infrastructure. So we don't track that share of revenue directly in the index. We have that data available separately on the BMI website. But for the purposes of the ESG country index, we just look at the actual construction growth. We look at other issues that are relevant directly for resilience. And the reason why you have seen one of those charts where it shows that some of these countries, such as Nigeria, will take a while to improve, it is precisely because these revenue-raising reforms have been delayed, either because of inflation or because of protests, or both. And so that's one of the inputs into the index as well. Now, the third question was about the COP29 target. I couldn't quite understand. Sorry, so if you don't mind following up exactly what the question was there. But in general, I agree that it was a very sort of very much fell short. And my take was that much of that increase that was pledged at COP29 would happen anyway, regardless of the conference. So it's a bit of a so that makes the increase even sort of less important. The other point I would mention is the sort of cuts to foreign aid that are happening in the US. I think that's another major issue to consider, because I don't think we've seen the last of those. Unfortunately, we're already seeing lots of sort of other programs outside of USAID being cut. Lending to groups such as the World Bank and funding for multilateral banks from the US might be another sort of issue, another source of funding that gets cut by the Trump administration. So that's definitely a headwind, unfortunately, for climate resilience. But if you want to follow up on that, please do, because I feel like I haven't fully answered your question.
Okay, no, that's excellent, Matt. Thanks a lot. These are very insightful. I wanted to just check with you whether you and your colleagues are ready to give us like a demonstration.
Yeah,
and
I can do that.
Okay, and if one of you could actually put the website to BMI on the chat box so that colleagues can visit the BMI website. And let me just use this opportunity to remind colleagues that we, as the African Development Bank, we have subscription to BMI. So anybody that is struggling to access, please reach out to Asia and myself, and we will ensure that you have the necessary rights to access and utilize the data to the benefit of your work and to facilitate your work program. Thank you. So please go ahead and we can see your, yes.
Yeah, so what you can see here is just the section of the BMI website that shows the ESG country surveys. BMI as a company specializes in emerging market research across many different themes. We have our country risk service, which is our key sort of economist service. We have lots of industries such as infrastructure, which is headed by Matteo here on the call. As you can see in this selection, if you hover over services and industries, you will see a large number of these industries. For each of those, we have a dedicated set of forecasts. We forecast many data points in each of those. So there is no chance that I can get through all of them, but I can quickly show you what ESG country looks like, because that's what I know, and I can show you how you can actually get the data and generate insights from those. The way you would actually access our data, if you're looking for any kind of data you might want, it's best probably to use this bulk data export function on the left. That's our sort of key function for when you need to access any kind of data. And you will see if you, for example, are looking for construction growth, you can type construction here. And if you then actually look into the infrastructure surveys, it will allow you to download all these different data sets for geographies that you may want to select. And you can use the same approach to download any kind of index that I spoke about within ESG country. So if you are interested in those, you can again select those. You would select them here. You would then choose the countries that we cover within ESG country. You would select your data range and any additional options that you might want to include, and then you can access the data. This will download an Excel file. We have other delivery services, other delivery options for this data. You can access it as a Fitch Connect add-in, as an Excel add-in, or via API. That's the data itself. You can then, of course, also access our research. And one of the ways, because especially one of the questions we often get for the ESG service specifically is how do you figure out which industries are being affected by ESG factors? And that's where this central search function becomes quite important. So for example, if you're interested in how mining is affected by environmental, social, and governance issues, you can type the keyword for mining here. You would then click on this research function, and you can then apply different service tags. So for ESG, you would select ESG country, and you will get a list of the service of the articles and reports where mining is mentioned as being affected by environmental, social, and governance issues. For example, you can see the Ghana ESG country report here, which goes into quite a lot of detail about illegal gold mining and how the new government might be or might not be looking to reform, and what kind of success they will have with tackling the issue, and how that might affect water pollution in the country. For example, that's one of the many issues that we look at. I don't have time to go through all of them, but hopefully that gives you a quick overview into how to use the website. I think if you're anyone really within the AFDB group is interested in learning about this a bit more, I think it's worth setting up a dedicated session about how to use the website. Because again, we have so many different products that there is just no chance that even on our call we could cover all of them. So I would probably explore that in a bit more detail afterwards.
On Matt's point there, I would just read, you typically with an infrastructure product demo, we're usually at least 30 minutes just to go through the project's data, the service, the research. So just as a point, I'd be happy to take time to go through that with any of you that would be interested in looking into those, looking into the platform more, looking into the infrastructure research, how you can use it, how you can access it, and how it could be relevant to you. So happy to do that in any kind of follow-up session that might be that might be scheduled. So just to make that clear.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take you up on this. We'll see how many colleagues would like to have dedicated specialized sessions on the website itself, or even just to have further discussion on the BMI services and how to maximize the services for delivery of our work program. So on this note, I think we have been quite efficient. Let me see if there are any questions. Are there any questions? We have maybe 1 minute for last question before we turn it over to our director to give us the closing remarks. Are there any questions? Okay, I do not see anybody. I think that the presentations were excellent, and let me thank you again for this. We'll reach out in due course. Dr. Eric Ogunle, please, you can come in. In just one moment. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think a very, very big thank you to our colleagues from BMI. It's been really, really helpful. Again, the idea here is to rather focus on how do we use, how can the bank staff who have access to this document use it effectively. I like the analysis you did with respect to what we can do, the scenario analysis, the type of information we can generate from this document. And what we really want to see is how do we, within ourselves, among ourselves, be able to do this type of assessment using the data and information that is available, through these very important information source. So we thank you for all the efforts you've made, at least to help us see how much information we can generate, how much use these very important sources of information can be. And I'm sure our colleagues too have also seen, and it amazes me to see, issues of risk assessment. And this is what we do every day in the countries. We need to understand the risks that are there for the bank, and then more importantly, the opportunities that lies under those risks that we need to take advantage of to be able to support this country. So once again, we really thank you. We hope and trust. One request I'd like to make is if you have something like a demo, either in form of a video, in form of an audio, in fact, whatever kind of demo that you have, or I don't know whether you have that kind of tool that can help people to follow step-by-step analysis of how to use some of this data to do the type of this very interesting scenario assessment. That would be really helpful. I'll enjoin you to kindly share it with our colleagues so we can share with us for us to use. So thank you very much once again, except other colleagues have some other interventions to make, but I'll just say a big thank you to you, and thank you, Namau, and your team for putting this together. Heja, I know you did a lot of work on this. Thank you very much for that. And for our BMI colleagues, Nswaki, Matteo, Matt, and Joe, we want to thank you for all the efforts. Heja, thank you for the big push. We really appreciate all the
Thank you.
efforts
You
and
are welcome,
all
sir.
the
Yeah.
colleagues who contributed to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If I may just quickly add on your point, Eric. So as your dedicated customer service success manager here at Fitch Solutions, I'd be on hand to support all the licensed users in terms of navigation of the Fitch platforms. So those demos would be my sort of scope, my domain. So I'm here to help anyone who would like a quick walkthrough of the data, the research, and what we cover on the platform. So just to quickly highlight that we do currently have a subscription in place that provides the users access to all industry research across North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa on the BMI platform, as well as global country risk research. But Swaki and myself are here to support you. Haja is our main point of contact, so we'd be happy to set up any calls based on requests we receive off the back of this. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you. On this note, we officially close the session and we will engage with BMI at a later stage for other areas that are of interest and priority to the bank. Thank you to everyone and thank you to BMI colleagues.
Thank you all.
Thanks very
so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
All the best.
See
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.